The first time anyone noticed the doctor's problem, he was standing in a crowded hospital hallway, surrounded by nurses, junior doctors, and board members, all waiting for him to say yes. The hospital had just secured a major international deal, and his name was the reason it happened. He was brilliant with patients, calm in emergencies, and respected across the city. Yet the whispers around him were not about his skills anymore. They were about his personal life. He was rich, successful, and powerful, but alone. The board believed image mattered. Patients trusted family men more, they said. Donors liked stability. And his own relatives, who controlled part of the family property, made it clear no wife meant no full inheritance. The pressure did not come all at once. It came slowly, quietly, like a hand tightening around his chest. The doctor listened to all of it without reacting. He had learned long ago how to hide emotions behind a calm face. Deep inside, however, the topic of marriage brought back memories he had buried for years. Love for him was not comfort. It was loss. And he had promised himself never to be trapped by it again. On the same day, a few floors below, a woman sat outside the emergency ward with her phone in her hand, counting missed calls from her workplace. She worked long shifts cleaning office spaces at night and helping at a small clinic during the day. Her clothes were worn, her shoes old, but she kept herself neat because dignity was the only thing she still owned fully. Her parent lay inside the ward, weak and silent, needing treatment she could barely afford. Bills had piled up. Loans were exhausted. Friends had stopped answering her calls. She stared at the hospital wall, wondering how long she could keep standing before life finally pushed her to the ground. Their worlds were never meant to cross. But that evening, an argument broke out near the reception desk when her employer accused her of leaving work without notice. She tried to explain, voice shaking, but stress made her words fall apart. That was when the doctor happened to walk past. He rarely paid attention to such scenes, yet something made him stop. Maybe it was her silence when the shouting got louder. Maybe it was the way she held her dignity, without begging. He asked one simple question and settled the issue with authority. The crowd dispersed quickly. She thanked him politely and turned to leave. He would have walked away too if he hadn't noticed the hospital bill envelope in her hand. Later that night, curiosity stayed with him. A few quiet questions from staff gave him the details. She worked hard. She caused no trouble. She needed money urgently. And most importantly, she had no family ties that could complicate things. That was when a cold, logical idea formed in his mind. 2 days passed. Then his assistant approached her with an unusual message. The doctor wanted to speak with her privately. She was confused and scared, assuming she had done something wrong. When she entered his office, she felt small among the polished furniture and silent walls. He did not waste time. He told her he needed a wife, not a real one, a legal one. Someone who could live with him, attend events, smile in public, and disappear from his life once the contract ended. In return, he would cover all her medical expenses, pay her monthly, and give her a fresh start afterward. At first, she thought it was a joke. Then she realized it, WASN, single quotes. The offer sounded unreal, even wrong. She asked why her. He answered honestly. She was unknown, sensible, and she needed help without wanting control. There would be no physical relationship, no emotional expectations, and no interference in each other's lives. She asked for time to think. That night, she sat beside her parents' bed, listening to the steady beeping of machines. Pride told her to refuse. Fear told her she had no other path left. She hated the idea of being chosen out of convenience. But she hated the idea of losing the only family she had even more. The next day she returned. A contract lay on the desk. Clean pages. Clear rules. She read slowly, careful not to miss anything. No claims on his property. No sharing of personal matters. No expectations of love. The marriage would look perfect to the outside world and empty inside. Then her eyes reached the final condition. She stopped breathing for a moment. Her hands trembled, but she did not speak yet. Something about that rule felt heavy, like it carried pain far deeper than words. She did not know his past, but she could sense fear behind his calm voice. She looked up at him, wanting to ask questions, wanting to understand, but his face was unreadable. This was not a discussion. It was a choice, she signed. That evening, the news spread fast. The famous doctor was marrying a woman no one knew. Reporters speculated. Relatives suddenly became polite. The hospital board relaxed. Everything was going according to plan, except nothing felt simple anymore. She moved into his house, a place too quiet for comfort. Separate rooms, separate lives. Polite words at breakfast, silence at night. They played their roles well in public. Smiles, gentle gestures, perfect photos. Alone. She reminded herself this was temporary. Alone. He told himself this arrangement would protect him. Neither of them noticed how often their thoughts began drifting back to each other, and neither realized that the contract meant to keep. Emotions out had already let something dangerous in. The days after the marriage moved fast, yet somehow felt heavy. Outside the house, everything looked perfect. Inside, everything felt careful. Too careful. She learned quickly how quiet rich houses could be. No noise, no warmth, just expensive furniture and big rooms that echoed her footsteps. Every morning, they greeted each other politely. Short words, no questions, no curiosity. She cooked simple food for herself and cleaned the small areas she used, careful not to disturb his routine. He left early for the hospital and returned late, often tired, sometimes silent. This was exactly how the contract had been designed. Still, small things began slipping through the cracks. One evening, she noticed he had not eaten anything that entire day. The food she had cooked sat untouched. She almost ignored it. It was none of her business. That was what she reminded herself. Yet something inside her pushed her to knock on his study door. He looked surprised, as if he had forgotten someone else lived in the house. She did not lecture him. She simply placed a plate on the table and walked away. He stared at the food for a long moment before eating quietly. That night, neither of them slept easily. At the hospital, people watched them closely. Nurses whispered about how calm and modest his wife seemed. Some admired her simplicity. Others doubted she belonged in his world. She heard everything but reacted to nothing. During public events, she played her role perfectly. She smiled when required, stood beside him with grace, and answered questions gently. The doctor noticed this. He had expected tension, discomfort, maybe even mistakes. Instead, she handled attention better than many people born into wealth. It confused him one afternoon. A senior board member invited them to dinner. The doctor warned her it would be exhausting and possibly uncomfortable. She nodded and said she understood. At the dinner table, she spoke little, listened carefully, and never embarrassed him once. On the way home, silence filled the car. He finally asked why she never demanded anything extra. No jewelry, no privileges, no questions about the future. She answered honestly. She said she had learned not to expect more than what was promised. Life had taken enough from her already for the first time. He felt something twist inside his chest. That night, memories returned to him without warning. A hospital room. Machines. A promise made too late. He woke up soaked in sweat, breath uneven. He sat on the edge of his bed until morning, reminding himself that feelings were dangerous. The rule existed for a reason. Days later, she received a call from a coworker. The night job was gone. They no longer needed her. Normally, this would have sent her into panic. Instead, she stared at the phone calmly. The contract had solved the financial problem she feared most. Still, losing that small part of independence hurt more than she expected. She did not tell him. Later that week, she slipped on a wet floor at the clinic where she helped part-time. It was minor, but the nurse insisted on checking her. The doctor happened to be nearby. When he saw her sitting quietly with an injury, something snapped. He scolded the staff for not calling him sooner. His voice echoed down the corridor. She watched him quietly, confused by the anger in his tone. Afterwards, she told him it was nothing serious. He replied sharply, reminding her she represented him now. It was careless to get hurt. The words stung. That night, she cried silently in her room, not because of the injury, but because she had briefly believed his concern was real. She reminded herself, again, this was a contract, not care. The next morning, he left early without speaking. Hours later, flowers arrived at the house. No note, no apology, just silence wrapped in petals. She did not touch them. The hospital board was pleased. Donations increased. Media praised the doctor's stability. Everything the marriage was supposed to fix was working, except the people inside it were changing. Late one evening, a citywide power cut left the house in darkness. She stood frozen in the living room, fear she had never spoken about crawling up her spine. He found her minutes later, standing still, hands shaking. Without thinking, he spoke gently. He guided her to sit, stayed nearby until the lights returned. Neither of them mentioned it. Afterward, but something had shifted. He began coming home earlier once in a while. She noticed. Sometimes they shared quiet dinners. Sometimes they exchanged stories about work, carefully avoiding personal pasts. The wall between them did not fall, but thin cracks appeared. Still, the rule lived between them. Whenever warmth grew too close, distance followed. Whenever kindness appeared, silence returned. The doctor often caught himself watching her when she was unaware. Then he would remind himself why this arrangement existed. She, too, struggled. She felt safe in his house, yet lonely. Protected, yet unseen. She wondered what kind of pain made a man write such a rule. One evening, while organizing old files the staff had carelessly placed in the study, she noticed a locked drawer. She did not open it. She did not need to. The presence of secrets was enough. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling for the first time since signing the contract. She felt fear not of poverty, not of the future, but of what might happen if she started caring. And somewhere down the hallway, the doctor sat alone, holding his past tightly. Unaware that the rule he believed protected him was slowly losing its power, time did not slow down. It moved quietly, like a shadow following them through the house. Weeks turned into months, and without realizing it, both of them had changed their routines around each other. She woke earlier now, was preparing breakfast even when he said it was unnecessary. He began noticing small details, how she preferred plain tea, how she folded laundry carefully, how she paused to feed birds on the balcony every morning. These were things a contract had never mentioned at the hospital. People had stopped calling her the doctor's wife with curiosity. Now they said it naturally. She had become part of the space, quietly helping where she could. Sometimes patients mistook her for a nurse, and instead of correcting them, she simply helped. The doctor saw this from a distance. She had never asked for attention, yet she earned respect without trying. It unsettled him in ways he did not understand. One afternoon, an emergency surgery ran longer than expected. The doctor came home exhausted, his hands still trembling from hours of work. He found her asleep on the couch, waiting for him. A light blanket wrapped clumsily around her. He stood there for a long moment. He should have woken her, told her to go to her room. Instead, he turned off the lights and left her undisturbed. That night, guilt kept him awake longer than usual. A few days later, she received news that should have made her happy. Her parents' health had finally stabilized. The treatment was working. She read the report twice, then sat quietly, tears blurring the words. She wanted to share it with someone. She found him in the study and told him softly. He listened. Then, in an unfamiliar moment of warmth, he said he was glad. No formal tone, no distance. She smiled for the rest of the day. That evening, they ate dinner together without any plans or reason. The conversation flowed easily, slipping into laughter before either realized what was happening. When silence returned, it felt awkward instead of comfortable. Both noticed. From that point on, Moments like these increased. Shared meals. Short conversations before bed. Quiet understanding without words. They were not close, yet no longer strangers. Still, the rule hung between them like a wall that could not be crossed. One day she started feeling unusually tired. She blamed it on stress and ignored it. Days passed, and the tiredness stayed. She grew dizzy once in the kitchen but caught herself before falling. She told no one. The doctor, however, noticed. He commented casually, but his eyes stayed on her longer than before. She laughed it off. He did not push. At the hospital, a senior nurse pulled her aside and suggested a routine checkup. She hesitated. Something deep inside her whispered fear. She went anyway. The doctor was not involved in the tests. She made sure of that. She sat alone in the waiting room afterward, hands clenched. Heart beating too fast for a simple checkup. When the result came, the world shifted slightly, like the floor tilting under her feet. She read it once. Then again, her mind went blank. She walked home slowly that evening, each step heavier than the last. The house felt unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else. She locked herself in her room and stared at the wall till night fell. The rule echoed loudly in her head. She did not sleep. The next few days passed in silence. She avoided him. She avoided mirrors. Every sensation felt louder, sharper. Fear mixed with guilt until she could no longer separate them. He sensed the distance immediately. Something was wrong, he asked once, calmly. She said she was fine. He did not believe her. Late one night, he went to her room to check on her. The door was slightly open. A paper lay on the table. He recognized the hospital stamp. Before reading the rest, his chest tightened. He did not knock. Her face drained of color. She saw him holding the report. Words rushed between them, sharp and cold. He accused her of breaking the one rule that mattered. She tried to explain, but emotion tangled her sentences. He did not listen. Fear had already taken over. He told her the contract was clear. He reminded her what she had agreed to. His voice lacked emotion, but his hands shook enough to betray him. She stood there quietly, absorbing every word. When he finished, she nodded. She did not cry. She did not argue. She simply said she would leave soon. That response unsettled, and more than anger would have. The following days were heavy with unspoken words. She packed slowly. He avoided the house as much as possible. The space between them felt wider than ever. One evening, as she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. She turned and spoke calmly. She said that despite everything, she did not regret this time. It saved her family when nothing else could. Then she left. The sound of the door closing echoed loudly in the silent house. For the first time since writing the rule, the doctor felt something break inside him. He sat alone that night, staring at the contract lying forgotten on the desk. It no longer felt like protection. It felt like a mistake. The house felt wrong the moment she left. Not empty, but unsettled, as if it no longer understood its purpose. The doctor moved through the rooms without thinking, touching nothing, changing nothing. Her cup still sat where she used to leave it. The cushion on the couch carried the shape of her weight. He told himself this was necessary. The rule existed to protect him. He had followed it. He had done exactly what the contract demanded, so why did his chest feel so tight? At the hospital, he returned to work as if nothing had happened. Surgeries, rounds, meetings, he handled all of it smoothly. Colleagues praised his focus. No one noticed the way he avoided the window near the parking lot. No one saw how he paused before answering simple questions. Late one night, a senior nurse hesitated before speaking. She gently asked if his wife was doing well. He answered without looking up. He said she had gone away for some time. The words tasted bitter. Meanwhile, she stayed in a small rented room near the city edge. It was quiet, cheap, and lonely. She told no one where she had gone. She lived carefully, saving money, working when she could. Her parents' treatment continued. That was the only thing that mattered now. Some nights, she cried. Most nights, she didn't. She told herself it was better this way. The contract had ended. The expectations were clear. Pain meant nothing compared to stability. But the silence inside her was heavy. Back at the hospital, the doctor faced a case that disturbed him deeply. A patient arrived with complications similar to one from years ago. The memory struck without warning. The machines, the rushed decisions, the loss he never allowed himself to mourn. For the first time in years, his calm slipped. He walked into his office and locked the door. His hands trembled. He remembered writing the rule, drafting every word carefully, convincing himself that distance was safety. No attachment. No risk. No second chance to fail. Yet when he thought of her, the logic fell apart. Days passed. The house remained silent. He found himself checking his phone without reason, expecting nothing yet hoping for something. One evening, his assistant approached him with an envelope. Routine paperwork, she said. He almost dismissed it until he saw a familiar clinic stamp. He opened it slowly. The contents hit him harder than any accusation. Medical notes, timelines, test confirmations. Everything pointed to one truth he had, ignored in his fear. The condition had existed before the contract ever began. The realization stole the air. From his lungs, he sat there for a long time, the office lights dimming around him. Shame followed quickly, sharp and unforgiving. He had accused her without listening. He had enforced the rule without understanding. For the first time, asked himself something he had avoided for years. What if the rule had never been about control? What if it had always been about fear? That night, he went home and opened the locked drawer in his study. Inside lay old reports, letters, and a photograph turned face down. He stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. It showed a younger version of himself beside someone he had loved deeply. Someone he had lost despite doing everything right. He finally let himself feel the grief. The following morning, he searched for her. It was not easy. She had disappeared intentionally, leaving no traces behind. He contacted clinics, co-workers, anyone who might know. Days passed without answers. During that time, something happened that shook him further. A patient he had grown close to passed away unexpectedly. The family thanked him anyway, telling him he had given their loved one dignity and care. After they left, he sat alone and understood something important. Love did not guarantee safety, but absence guaranteed regret. The search continued when he finally found her address. He stood outside the building longer than necessary. He looked nothing like the powerful doctor people feared. He looked like a man unsure of whether he deserved forgiveness. He knocked. She took a long moment before opening the door. When she saw him, surprise quickly turned into guarded calm. She did not invite him in. He spoke first. He did not defend himself. He did not explain the contract. He apologized. It was simple, honest, and long overdue. She listened quietly. He told her he had been wrong, that the rule had blinded him, that fear had made him cruel. He did not ask for understanding. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply said the truth when he finished. Silence stretched between them. She finally spoke. She said she had known the rule came from pain. She said she accepted the contract with open eyes. But what hurt was not the rule, it was being dismissed without trust. Her words cut gently. Yet deeply he nodded. There was nothing else to say. She told him she needed time, space, clarity. She reminded him that caring again was not easy for someone who had been reduced to a clause in a contract. He respected that as he left. He felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The rule had been enforced. The damage had been done, but something had shifted. For the first time since losing control of his emotions, the doctor understood that protecting the heart by closing it completely was never the answer, and somewhere behind the closed door, she leaned against the wall, hands shaking. Realizing that the part she thought was over had not ended after all, the days after their meeting passed slowly, each hour stretching longer than the last. The doctor returned to the quiet house, but this time it no longer felt like a place waiting to be repaired. It felt like a reminder. Every room carried a version of himself he no longer wanted to be. He stopped avoiding that feeling at work. He began approaching people differently. He listened longer. He explained more. When junior staff made mistakes, he corrected them without sharp words. Those who had worked with him for years noticed the change but said nothing. It was clear something inside him had settled. He also made a decision he had delayed for far too long. The contract was destroyed, not rewritten, not adjusted. Destroyed. He did it quietly one evening, tearing the pages carefully, not in anger, but with acceptance. What he had tried to control with words on paper had never truly been under his control. Meanwhile, she focused on rebuilding her life. She worked at a modest clinic helping patients with patience and care. The work did not pay much, but it gave her purpose again. Her parent grew stronger each week, slowly returning to everyday life. Still, she carried questions she did not yet have answers for. Some nights she missed the quiet dinners. Not the house. Not the comfort. Him, she hated that truth. One afternoon, a medical emergency tested everything the doctor had learned. A complicated case was transferred suddenly, involving risks he could not ignore. The situation mirrored the past too closely. This time, however, he did not shut down. He communicated openly. He adjusted plans. He trusted his team instead of carrying the burden alone. The surgery lasted hours and ended successfully. When it was over, relief washed over him like rain after a long drought. That night, he understood something clearly. Fear had shaped his rule. Trust had saved his patient. The next morning, he visited her clinic. Not to convince, not to explain, only to see her. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her first reaction was confusion, then caution. He smiled softly and asked if she had time later to talk. She hesitated, then nodded. They met in a quiet public place nearby. No walls, no contracts. No power imbalance, he spoke honestly. He told her he had destroyed the contract and ended every legal tie they shared. He said she owed him nothing. He said he did not expect forgiveness. He told her he wanted to know her not as a solution, not as a role, but as a person. She listened carefully. She told him she was afraid not of him, but of herself. Afraid to hope again. Afraid that if she trusted him, the pain would return. He did not promise perfection. He promised effort. She asked him one question then. She asked if the rules still mattered. He shook his head. He said the rule no longer existed. He said that if life brought unexpected turns, he would face them, not hide behind words. Silence followed. Not heavy, but thoughtful. She took a deep breath. She said she could not give him an answer immediately. She needed time. He accepted that. Weeks passed. They spoke occasionally. Short messages. Simple check-ins. No pressure. Slowly, something calm replaced the fear. One evening, after finishing work, she visited the house for the last time. Not to return, but to close a chapter. He was there. They walked through the rooms together, sharing memories that had once felt forbidden. At the door, she stopped. She told him she had learned something important through all of this. That love could not grow where fear ruled. And that respect mattered more than promises. She said she was willing to try again, not as a contract, not as a performance, but honestly. He did not respond with celebration. He responded with gratitude. Their story did not end with fireworks or dramatic confessions. It continued quietly, built on conversations, patience, and choice. The doctor never wrote another rule. She never agreed to be a condition. Again. And what began as a fake marriage became something real. Not because it was planned, but because fear was finally replaced with trust. Life, did not suddenly become perfect after their decision to try again. In fact, it became quieter in a different way. There were no grand gestures, no public announcements, and no explanations to anyone. They both understood that what they were building needed protection, not attention. They met in simple places. small cafes, short walks near the clinic, conversations that started lightly and slowly went deeper. Sometimes they talked about their days. Sometimes they sat in silence without discomfort. This was new for both of them. Trust was being rebuilt, not assumed. The doctor found himself learning patience. He had spent years fixing urgent problems, making fast decisions, saving lives in minutes. This was different. This required waiting, listening, accepting that some wounds held only when left untouched. She watched him carefully. She noticed how he no longer hid behind authority. When something felt difficult, when he was unsure, he admitted it. When fear appeared, he did not let it decide everything. These changes mattered more to her than apologies ever could. Still, doubt came quietly. Some nights she wondered if the past would return, if one day he would panic again and choose control over connection. She never voiced these thoughts, but they showed in her silence. He learned to read that silence too. One evening, after a long shift, she arrived late and tired. They sat together without speaking for a while. Then she finally asked a question. She had been carrying for weeks. She asked what made him write the rule in the first place. He took a long breath before answering. He told her about a time when he had trusted completely and lost everything despite doing his best. He spoke of guilt that lingered long after grief should have faded, of how success at work had felt hollow, and how emotional distance felt safer than hope. He admitted the rule was never about her. It was about his fear of failing someone again. She listened without interruption when he finished. She did not comfort him with words. Instead, she reached out and held his hand briefly. Then she let go. That simple act carried more meaning than any promise. At the hospital, rumors slowly started again. People noticed them together more often. Some assumed the marriage had resumed. Others guessed wrongly. He did not correct anyone. He no longer cared about appearances. One afternoon, the hospital board requested a meeting. They wanted clarity, stability, answers. He surprised them. He told them his personal life would no longer be managed for the comfort of public opinion, that his work spoke for itself. That trust should come from integrity, not image. Some members resisted. Others respected him more for it. He walked out of that meeting feeling lighter than he had in years. She supported his decision quietly. She did not praise him. She simply stood beside him when reactions followed. Some people withdrew. Others admired the honesty. Life adjusted around the truth. Weeks turned into months. Their connection grew steadily. Not dramatically, steadily. They learned each other's boundaries again, this time without rules written on paper. They disagreed sometimes. They took space when needed. They chose each other daily instead of assuming anything. One morning, she felt unwell at work. She brushed it off at first. But as the day passed, discomfort grew stronger. Memories of fear returned, sharp and unwanted. She told him not with panic. With honesty, he listened calmly. He asked if she wanted him involved. He did not push. He did not decide for her. She said yes. They faced the situation together. Openly, without contracts or threats hanging in the air. Whatever the outcome, it was no longer something she had to carry alone. That realization alone eased her fear. Later, sitting side by side, she noticed something. Okay? He was not afraid. He was present, the rule that had once controlled. Everything no longer existed, even in his mind. That night, she understood that trying again had not erased the past. It had transformed it. Their story was no longer about a fake, marriage, or a shocking rule. It was about two people choosing honesty over fear. Day after day, in ordinary moments, and for the first time, that felt real enough to last. Life continued in small steps after that moment of honesty. Nothing dramatic happened overnight, and strangely, that made everything feel more real. They did not rush to define what they were. They allowed the days to decide that for them. The doctor became more attentive in quiet ways. He remembered her work schedule and adjusted his own, so they could walk together in the evenings sometimes. He checked in without hovering. He listened without trying to solve everything. These were habits he had never practiced before. She began to relax around him. Not fully, not all at once, but enough to breathe easier. She joked more. She spoke openly when something bothered her instead of holding it inside. She noticed how seriously he took her words, how he never dismissed her feelings as unimportant. Still, traces of the past remained. Some mornings, she woke with a tight feeling in her chest, unsure of where she stood. Other days, he caught himself watching her quietly, afraid that one wrong step might undo everything they had rebuilt. Neither said these things out loud, but both felt them. One weekend, they decided to visit a quiet town outside the city. It wasn't planned as a romantic trip. It was simply a break from routine. They stayed in a modest guest house, far from attention and expectations. There, without the pressure of roles, something softened further. They cooked together. They argued lightly over simple things, like directions and timing. They laughed when mistakes happened. For the first time, memories were being made without pretense. One evening, sitting outside as the air cooled, she shared a story from her past. Not the painful parts, but the small happy ones. A childhood memory. A dream she once had but never spoke about. He listened closely. He realized then how little he truly knew. About her inner world and how much he wanted to understand it. Later that night, he admitted something in return. He admitted that he was afraid of being ordinary. That success had become his shield. That without it, he once felt worthless. She told him quietly that he never seemed ordinary to her, that stayed with him back in the city. Reality returned. Work grew demanding again. The hospital faced administrative pressure. Media attention resurfaced after someone spotted them together publicly. Questions returned. Friends suggested it was time to make things official again. The hospital board hinted at stability. Even acquaintances assumed reconciliation meant returning to the old labels. This time, did not let others write the story. He told her honestly what was happening. He asked what she wanted, not what would look good. She appreciated that question more than he knew. She said she wanted clarity, but only if it came without fear. She refused to live under assumptions or expectations again. She needed to know they were choosing each other freely. That night, he thought deeply. He remembered how easily power once shaped his choices, how comfort had replaced courage, and how much he had lost because of it. The next morning, he made a quiet decision. He publicly corrected false assumptions. He told close colleagues that his personal life was private and evolving. He refused to label anything prematurely. Some people respected this. Others did not. For the first time, no longer mattered. She watched these changes from a distance, noticing how consistent his actions had become. Not dramatic, not defensive. Just steady trust grows that way. One evening, after a long day, they sat together in the living room. The same room that once felt silent and cold, now it felt lived in. She spoke softly, choosing her words carefully. She said she was beginning to feel safe again, not because nothing bad could happen, but because they would face it together. He did not respond immediately. He took her hand. Not to promise, not to claim, but to acknowledge. That simple moment said more than any contract ever could. Outside, the world continued with its expectations and demands. Inside, something quieter and stronger was taking shape. The story was no longer about a rule that controlled them. It was about two people learning how to stay without fear, without force, and without conditions. The change between them became noticeable, not because it was loud, but because it was steady. Days no longer felt uncertain. They woke each morning knowing where they stood, even if nothing had been spoken the night before. That quiet understanding settled into their lives like something that had always been missing. The doctor started bringing less work home, not because he cared less, but because he finally understood the value of stepping away. Some evenings, they cooked together. Other nights, they ordered simple food and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights without talking much. She found comfort in these moments. They felt ordinary in the best way. At work, her confidence grew. Patients trusted her easily, sensing her calm nature. Colleagues respected her for her dedication rather than her past connection to someone powerful. She built her own space again, slowly but honestly. He noticed that too. Instead of feeling threatened, he felt proud. One afternoon, an unexpected invitation arrived. A hospital charity event planned months in advance required his presence and, by tradition, a partner beside him. He hesitated before mentioning it to her, unsure whether old expectations would return. When he finally asked her how she felt about attending, she was quiet for a moment. Then she surprised him. She said she would go not to perform. Not to pretend, but simply to be there. On her terms, that answer mattered. The night of the event, she wore something simple. No attempt to impress. No role to play. When they arrived, people watched closely. Trying to interpret what they saw calm. They saw comfort. They did not see a contract. The doctor realized then that real stability could never be forced. It only appeared when fear was no longer leading the way. As the evening progressed, an older colleague approached quietly. He said he had misjudged the situation once. He said real strength showed in standing honestly beside someone, not hiding behind structure. The words stayed with the doctor. After the event, they walked home instead of taking the car. The city felt quieter at that hour. She admitted the evening had brought back mixed emotions, but she was glad she faced them instead of running. He told her that seeing her choose freely meant more to him than public approval ever had. Time moved forward again. A small personal decision soon followed. He stepped back from a leadership position that demanded endless hours and little humanity. It surprised many. To him, it felt necessary. She supported him, reminding him that choosing balance was not weakness. Weeks later, they visited her parent together. The house was modest, warm, and filled with quiet gratitude. Watching her laugh freely, they reminded him how far both of them had come. Later that evening, sitting outside under a fading sky, she spoke about the future not with fear, but with curiosity. She said she didn't know exactly what it would look like, but she wanted it to be honest. He agreed. There were no grand promises, no timelines, just acceptance. As the months passed, shared routines became habits. Trust stopped feeling fragile. It became something they relied on rather than questioned. One night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, she reminded him of the rule that had once controlled everything. She asked if he ever regretted destroying it. He answered without hesitation. No, he said, rules built from fear always collapse. What mattered was what survived after they were gone. She smiled quietly. The story, once defined by control and distance, had rewritten itself, not through perfection, but through choice. And in that calm understanding, both of them realized that what began as something temporary had quietly become something lasting.